If ghosts and spirits are still energy, then is it possible for them to communicate with us? And if so, how can we go about meeting them halfway? Those who investigate the paranormal have a variety of methods as they aim to create that bridge between the dead and the living. This is Skull Babylon, and you're about to listen to episode 69 of Paradigm Shift Radio, in which we welcome on some top-tier names in the realm of paranormal investigation. Our guests for this episode are Dave Gibb of the Canadian Haunting and Paranormal Society, and Mark Nesbitt, the author of the well-known book series Ghosts of Gettysburg. Both Dave and Mark have been humbly involved with the field of haunting investigations and communicating with spirits. Among other things, we discuss their approaches when attempting to document digital evidence of the spirits trying to talk to us, such as the electronic voice phenomena. Neither of them claim to have absolute answer, but their passion for helping others and the spirits themselves is what motivates them to do what they do, as we all continue to question and seek an understanding within this mysterious universe. Be sure to check out their websites for more information about what they do, including links to Mark's popular book series. If you enjoy Paradigm Shift Radio and the difference it is making in the world through the free weekly thought-provoking and perception-expanding content it provides, and would like to support it and be involved, then consider becoming an official sponsor for the show so we can help promote your consciousness-shifting work and website with our global audience. Find more information or simply donate in general at paradigmshiftcentral.com/donate. Be sure to tell more friends about the show, continue the conversation further on your own, and be open to any experiences, paranormal or otherwise, that come your way. Enjoy the show.
Good evening, boys and girls. Are you ready for another entertaining and spooky episode of Paradigm Shifty Crypts from the Tales? Sort of, not really. Well, yes and no, but actually more so definitely yes tonight. This is Paradigm Shift Radio, and this is Skull Babylon, aka Brendon Wolfshield Culleton, aka Skull the Wolf, and you are tuned in for another exciting episode of Paradigm Shift Radio. And of course, if you're tuned in live, big shout out to everybody. We got about 20 users in the live chat right off the bat, and a good reason behind that, because we got some really exciting guests on tonight's show, and tonight's show is going to be revolving around the topic of investigating the paranormal. And our guests for tonight are going to be Dave Gibb of the Canadian Hauntings and Paranormal Society, and then also author Mark Nesbitt, who's the well-known author of the Ghosts of Gettysburg series. So we're going to be bringing them on in the next couple minutes. First of all, I'd just like to welcome everybody who is tuned in, and for those of you who have not tuned in before, let me just bring you up to speed. ParadigmShiftCentral.com is the place that you want to check out, and feel free to check out the website even while you're listening to this show, be it now or either in the future. And, of course, you can find all of the past episodes of Paradigm Shift there. They're all through the main link in the website, and you can find the full MP3 archive as well as all the episodes on YouTube. So, of course, we encourage you to go back and check it out. And this is more than just a radio show. This is part of a global network. It is represented on behalf of the Paradigm Shift global community. So there are Paradigm Shift communities all across the world. I myself am from London, Ontario, Canada, and the Paradigm Shift communities are about encouraging the creation of physical and digital space to have open-minded discussion and to be able to support each other and to really be able to create a strong community. And that's something that has definitely been happening over the year. So shout out to all our Paradigm Shift community admins. And again, check out the main website and find out how you can get more involved there. We're always looking for more people to start up a Paradigm Shift community where they are. And we got all the tools that you need. There's a lot of people who are already doing this. There's a lot of momentum behind it. And it's really changing lives. And it's bringing a lot of topics into the spotlight that would otherwise sort of get pushed off to the side, that would otherwise be considered paranormal. And para in itself just kind of means off to the side. So maybe what we're doing here tonight is that we're making the paranormal not so paranormal by talking about it in a way that hopefully will be able to help us understand it and not just be able to look at it as a spectacle, but be able to tie it in with the questions such as, why are we here? What is the meaning of, not even just what is the meaning of life, but also what is the relationship between ourselves and our reality. And those of you who tuned into episodes of the past on Paradigm Shift Radio, you know that we get pretty multidimensional when it comes to a lot of ideas, and whether that's relating to dream exploration or it is relating to the topic of spirits, and obviously in this case particularly the spirits of those who have passed on, and that's where we get into the idea of hauntings and the idea of energy sticking around, and how we sometimes sort of pick up on the idea of these spirits trying to communicate back to us. through the veil. So those will be some of the things that we'll definitely be talking about tonight. So again, if you haven't yet, please check out facebook.com/ParadigmShiftRadio. Like the show, support it. If you're listening to this live, please continue to share it with your friends. There's still quite a bit of time ahead of us, and there's still going to be a lot of exciting and excellent conversation. And we want to also invite you to call in the second half of the show. So if you have a paranormal experience of your own, if you've had some sort of crazy stuff that you're just not quite sure if you can explain it, particularly in the themes of ghosts and spirits is what we're talking about tonight. Obviously, you can sort of fit in the idea of UFO and Sasquatch right in there with the paranormal, but maybe we'll be saving that for another episode. And we did just have an episode about UFOs not too long ago specifically, but tonight we're sticking with the theme that is leading up to the Halloween day, which is just less than a week away. So definitely an appropriate idea to be able to talk about paranormal experiences. So to get things rolling, we are going to bring on Dave first, and then we'll bring on Mark slightly after, just as we do a regular sound check, and then we'll get them introduced, and then we'll be able to continue the show from there. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. So let's get things rolling, and Dave, if you're ready, we're going to bring you on to the air. Here we go.
How you doing there? Welcome from this part of Canada.
Hey, Dave. All right. Good to hear from you. Now, I will say, Dave, sound check-wise, we did check ahead of time. I'm going to have to ask my audience. It sounds a little hollow on your end, so we may want to make the decision to jump over to the phone. So, Dave, just say hello again. Just give yourself a quick introduction before we bring Mark on. And then for the audience, I'm going to need you guys to tell me, give me an 1111 if Dave's mic is okay for you guys recording-wise. So, yeah, Dave, go ahead. Just introduce yourself real quick.
How you doing? My name is Dave Gibb. I'm the founder and director of the Canadian Haunting and Paranormal Society. We're the CHAPS family member for Ontario, and please take a call.
All right, awesome. Okay, so again, guys, give me an 1111, or rather, just tell me in the chat whether you think that was too quiet, because I'll need to be looking for the people who couldn't hear it too well, and if so, we'll might get Dave to hop over to a phone, in which case we'll go from there. But again, we just want to make sure that things are okay. Yeah, it kind of sounds like Dave's in a box, so we may want to switch over to the phone. But we'll bring Mark on. Dave, do you mind doing that? Do you mind switching over to the phone, and then any long distance charges we'll put them off as a business expense on our end, so we don't need to worry about it. Do you want to try that real quick, Dave, before we get going?
I'll give it a shot. Okay,
cool. All right, so Dave, I'm just going to mute you, and then we're going to bring Mark on, and then Dave's going to call in, and we'll bring him back on once he's calling in with the phone, because I know it will make you'll be able to tell the difference. It'll sound a lot better, and it'll make the episode better and worth it for you as the audience. So with that said, we're going to bring Mark on, and I think Mark's got an okay mic, so we'll be able to go from there. So Mark, if you're ready, we're going to bring you on to the air. Here we go. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Brendon.
There we go. Okay, yeah. So Mark doesn't sound like he's necessarily in a box, and we were getting confirmations that Dave was a bit muffled. So, all right.
Okay, but I have a little bit of a problem on this side, Brendon.
What's that?
I'm hearing an echo. In other words,
that would probably be the player of the episode that is actually playing right now. So if you're in the live link for the episode, just go up and pause the episode. Is my best guess.
Let's see. Pause the episode. How do I? Let's see.
You just scroll up and pause it. So. But yeah, that would probably be the solution there. And you do have your headphones on, so...
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay. Do we see that?
The only thing I can see, it says current calls. Is that it? Is that where I pause it?
Oh, no, sorry. In your browser. In your internet browser. So, not sure if Carol's there. She would know.
Hang on a second. I'll get her.
Okay, all right, no problem. Okay, so with that said, I'm just going to take this time to actually introduce one other person who's going to be with us on the show tonight, and that person is a person who's been on the show in the past, and that person in particular is my father, Paul. And Paul was on the episode that we did about superheroes and Superman in particular, and that was a really fun episode that we did back then, so you can go back and check that out along with all the other awesome episodes. And we're just going to get Paul to introduce himself real quick in the meantime, and then we're going to bring everybody else back into the circle. So, Paul, say hello.
Good evening, everyone.
Okay.
Welcome to my home.
Yeah, so you can see where I get it from, right? So, the Halloweens at our house were just a riot, and maybe we'll spend another episode talking about that. So, I got Dave, who's calling back in, I believe, so I'm just going to make sure that we got Dave with us as well. But, Mark, are you there right at this moment?
Yes, I am, and everything's fine. That's exactly what we needed to do, yes.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. All right, so let me just bring Dave back into the circle, presuming this number is his. So here we go. Dave, I'm going to bring you on.
Hello, it's me.
Dave. There we go. Okay, perfect. Yes, that does sounds a lot better than what we had before. So we'll work with this. Perfect. Okay. Well, with that said, now that we got everybody in the circle and things are sounding technically okay, we're ready to move forward with this conversation. So I'll give a bit of a bio in terms of the bios that I have in front of me. So just to introduce Mark first, and then we'll get Mark to introduce himself, and Dave already briefly introduced himself, and then we'll get into the discussion topic itself of what is the paranormal. So Mark Nesbitt was a National Park Service Ranger historian for 5 years at Gettysburg before starting his own research and writing company. Since then, he has published over 14 books, including the national award-winning Ghosts of Gettysburg series, 2 Ghost Hunters Field Guides, and the Civil War Ghost Trails. His stories have been seen on the History Channel, A&E, the Discovery Channel, the Travel Channel, Unsolved Mysteries, and numerous regional television shows, and heard on Coast to Coast and regional radio. In 1994, he created the commercially successful Ghosts of Gettysburg candlelight walking tours, and in 2006, the Ghosts of Fredericksburg tours. So that's the intro that we have there. So introducing Mark. But Mark, tell us just a little bit more about yourself in your own words.
That's a pretty good summation of what I've done in the last several years. But I think one of the more important parts, at least in terms of how I got started on all this, was when I was with the Park Service. That was an interesting several years of my life because I lived in some of the historic houses on the battlefield, and they were indeed haunted, several of them. And, of course, something would happen to me that I couldn't explain, and I'd go into the coffee room the next day and casually mention it, and people would say, wait, you got to stop right now, and you have to talk to this person who lived in the house before you. And sure enough, they would have had the same experience. So that's how I started collecting all these stories. I started jotting them down, and now eventually, after a while here, I have about 1,300 stories on Gettysburg and Fredericksburg and some other major battlefields in the Civil War.
That's wonderful, and no doubt that is what we will be talking about tonight, is the idea that there are just so many stories of places such as Gettysburg, and it's an interesting tie-in because that in itself, just a segue into a bit more introduction to Dave, our other caller, our other guest here tonight, our other co-host. Dave is actually going to, I mean, you can explain in his own words, but as just mentioned in his bio, I'll just read it real quick. So Dave is father and husband and has teenagers So father and husband has teenagers, investigating for 19 years, and he started in Gettysburg after an experience with a sensei. So he's traveled to Gettysburg many times, and in 2005 he formed CHAPS, and again that's a Canadian version of the well-known TAPS, in Pembroke, Ontario, and he kind of grew up as a spiritualist, which is something that was also mentioned, and I'll just say this for those of you who haven't checked it out yet, you can go back and check out the video that I actually put up about the paranormal investigation that I took part on and with Dave, and that was at the Sarnia Imperial Theater, and that's definitely kind of a lead-in to this episode. So maybe if you're listening to this episode in the future, feel free to pause this and go check that, and you can find that on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/SkullBabylon. But so Dave, just if you'd like to, maybe just sort of tie in and introduce yourself a little bit more, but explain to us, what was it about Gettysburg itself that really got you interested in this experience? And I guess I'll just say, just to for the audience's sake, Gettysburg, for those of you who aren't familiar, Gettysburg is the physical location where a very, very critical battle took place during the Civil War in 1863. So there was a lot of violence that took place there, and obviously there is a lot of energy that is still there. And as Mark and Dave can explain, there are numerous sightings still to this date. So again, Dave, what was it about Gettysburg that sort of got you more interested in this story?
Wow, I mean that's an incredibly broad question, frankly, because Gettysburg itself just lends to an incredible feeling. I mean, there's everything about the place. Even downtown shopping, you get a sensation that there's something special about it. And the fields do come alive at a certain time. I mean, there's one point in time when you're there and you've got the 10,000 other people that are walking around, and there's another time when it gets a little darker at night and maybe your senses are just a tad more acute. It's brilliant, really. I mean, the sensations, you don't even have to be ghost hunting per se, but just the walking around, the feeling, knowing what has been going on there, knowing the history that was there, I was fortunate enough that I had a martial arts instructor who lived in Tawnytown up the way, and we used to go visit it, every night when I'd go stay with him, and it was incredible. I mean, the first time I really had an experience there, I mean, we were in a back road near Spangler Spring, and it wasn't your typical traveled route that everybody else went. It was a service road, and we were just sitting in the car, and it was dark, and we had watched what we thought was what looked anyway like a lantern coming down the hill, and it wasn't a pathway. It was brush, and out of nowhere you would have thought somebody let off a flintlock pistol inside the car. It was just an incredible loud flash that went off inside the car. It was brilliant. Of course, I didn't have my video camera on. And, it was from that point in time. Even previous to that, I was interested in it, but it was at that point in time that I had to figure something out, and I had to start looking into this a little bit further and see for myself what could be there, because I wanted to have an explanation of that, and what you feel there is so big. It somewhat works with your mind to go. I don't have any proof of this, but man, I want to find out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's an interesting thing when it comes to experiences relating with spirits, because it seems that some people are more sensitive to it than others, and theoretically, some people can walk right through Gettysburg and not really think too much of it. But for those of us who just innately are kind of, we're not even that we're looking for it, but there's something within us that innately sort of like opens ourselves up to it. So, Mark, I'm curious, just from your own personal perspective, I mean, how do you sort of perceive the hauntings, the ghost phenomena in general? Like, what are your thoughts on the ideas of spirits and this idea that they are trying to communicate with us?
Well, I agree with a lot of the things that I heard on Dave's video there, and through the years, I think I've developed several theories and borrowed some theories from other people concerning what ghosts might be. Obviously there's some sort of energy. I believe that they're remnant energy, and they appear occasionally to maintain or retain the personality of the individuals that they once inhabited. The energy is obvious because energy. What else could it be? We wouldn't. It's the only way you notice existence or reality. Even matter is energy in a different form. So if we can perceive it, then it must be some kind of energy, and that's I think what happens with the ghosts or the spirits, and the fact that they maintain their personalities. Is evident even in, for example, residual hauntings. You have your intelligent or interactive hauntings. That's obvious that they retain their personalities there when they acknowledge you or speak to you. But even in the residual, for example, Phantom Regiment that has been seen over the years at Gettysburg, I have probably half a dozen accounts of this unit of soldiers that marches out of the woods. It seems to happen between the Peach Orchard and Little Round Top, for the most part, and they march around, do their maneuvers, and then march back into the woods, or sometimes just vanish in front of people, and that is evidence to me of the fact that these people had been drilled. I mean, drill was every day in the Civil War. They had been drilled so often that this type of behavior would continue in mass even after they have passed on.
Yeah, I like that idea that the repetition of the energy repeating its pattern is what kept it around. So, I mean, it leads into the idea that, yes, people who have spent their entire lives in a house would naturally want to stick around afterwards. And I mean, with the themes of spirits, I mean, for me personally, and something we talked about on the show many times in the past, like, it's this idea that reality is not as cut and dry as it appears to be, and obviously that opens up a lot of questions, and even the idea of, can consciousness exist without a body, outside of the physical body, and whether referring to that as a spirit or a soul or either way. But I think it's it's really interesting, just in the sense that there's this one idea that it says that some of the spirits are actually spirits who have like not crossed over, who the ones that stick around for the hauntings in some cases are ones that like didn't go into the light, so to speak, and they sort of stick around and they're still drawn to their earthly place, and whether that be their entire soul or just a part of it, and like you said, like the remnant of energy, it's definitely prevalent. I mean, it's not really, I mean, it's just kind of putting an idea forth, but I know definitely in themes with Gettysburg, this is where I'm happy to have my father here with us, because I know he's got his own experience having been at Gettysburg, and I myself, I was at Gettysburg as a young boy, and that was why my father was there too, as part of the filming for the movie Gettysburg. So I mean, just passing it over to my dad, like, I mean, what was it like for you to be on the ground of Gettysburg during the filming of a movie Gettysburg? It really seems like an idea like that would kind of stir up these energies, so to speak. So I just want to talk into the mic a bit more.
I think, thinking back to the movie, that I think the concept that there was some kind of energy that was flowing through the place is definitely a valid explanation. You know, there's been 2 times in my life when I've actually gone somewhere, and if I closed my eyes, I knew I'd be there, and it was like, for lack of better words, plugging your fingers into an electric socket, and you could just feel the energy. The first one was a religious experience at St. Joseph's Oratory, a place where miracles had taken place, and there's a great deal of energy there. And then the second place definitely was at Gettysburg, and I'll never forget the first time I ever went there, and it was actually by Culp's Hill, in front of the old cemetery gate, and it was just the hair on the back of my neck stood up. It was a remarkable experience, and I know being there for 3 weeks during the filming of the movie that again, it was just, the whole place was like it was charged.
Yeah. So with the idea that some places are more charged than others, it opens up the idea that there is this potential to record, to be able to capture and record as data some of the energy that is coming through. And that's why I think it's really interesting when we do look at things such as the EVPs, the electronic voice phenomena, which is something that we'll be playing a few samples of tonight. But I'd love to just pass this over to Dave and hear a little bit more from Dave in terms of the approaches that we can take when investigating these paranormal experiences and trying to be able to document some form of communication that occurs with these other energies. So Dave, if you just want to give us like an overview of like the different ways that we can do that.
Well, I think realistically speaking, you can see that there's about 1,000 different ways to approach it. You see it on TV of different shows. A lot of people like to provoke things. Some people try to do a more psychic route, doing seances and whatever. Myself, our team isn't really based on that. I like to go in with a certain line of questioning, certainly go in with respect. We don't really provoke a great deal. It's making sure that we document any activity that occurs, but realistically keeping an open mind that most of the stuff that you're going to come across really is kind of pareidolia. I mean, it's going to be something that you could just be thinking you're feeling. Most times it's going to be something physical. So I think in a paranormal investigation, you need to go in with an open mind, yet you do have to go in with a cynical mind, because otherwise you're going to end up with what you have out there, which is a cops of rather irresponsible teams that run around hollering and screaming and making noises and making a big to-do about things that don't really exist. I would much rather in the end be left with something that seriously I could say I cannot explain this, that this is something I couldn't debunk. I want to go in and try to find the physical response for everything that happens. This is why when we have a noise, we tend to want to look around to see what created it and see if we can recreate it, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, there's many approaches out there, though. However, I mean, there's a metaphysical approach to it, and there's a physical approach to it, And for us, we tend to use a more physical approach.
Right. And Mark, what different approaches have you seen over the years? And
And also, just kind of like segueing that, I know just recently you were assisting the CHAPS team was actually in Gettysburg, and I know you can't talk about that too much because they're making an episode about that. But again, yeah, what different modalities, what different methods have you seen in terms of people attempting to create some bridge for communication to occur?
Well, it sort of depends on where we're going. For example, when we have a house or something, for example, we did a place called Fall Hill down in outside of Fredericksburg, Virginia, another famous Civil War battlefield. And I always like to interview, just take one or two people and interview the individuals first who are experiencing the phenomenon. And then after I do the interview, and interestingly enough, in that particular interview, there were only three of us in the room, and I got some EVP that actually overlaid what we were talking. In other words, it kind of interrupted us. We obviously couldn't hear it until I played it back. But so you never know when you're going to get something like that. Then the next thing we do is we after we interview, we go and inspect the place to make sure that there's in the daylight, so there's no trip hazards or anything that could give us a false positive with any of our equipment. And then we'll go back with a full team and do an full investigation there. Not necessarily at night. I'd rather not do it at night because that narrows your scope a little bit in terms of visual, and also everything is magnified. And I'd rather just, and plus there's no, at least I haven't seen the rule book for ghosts that say they can only come out at night. In fact, half of my stories, out of all those stories, half of them occurred during the day. And so it's not necessary. But one thing that you need to do, and I agree wholeheartedly with Dave on this, that the provoking is a type of thing that you really don't want to do, especially when you're doing something with Victorian Americans, that when Queen Victoria was on the throne, there was a genteel type of a society then. In spite of the fact that it was the most vicious, bloodiest war we ever had in America, it was still a genteel time when the women would introduce or speak to their husbands as Mr. such and such whenever they were out in public. So you can't run in someplace and yell at them and tell them to slap you and smack you around and stuff like that. A lot of times when we're getting EVP and trying to contact soldiers, you will hear a lot of white noise in the back. It's almost as if, the whole unit or the whole company or whatever is trying to talk to you because, they finally realize somebody can hear them. And you have to ask them, okay, will the highest ranking officer please speak to me? And, of course, all military men know that they have to shut up then, let the lieutenant speak. So those are some of the things that we use when we're doing investigations at Gettysburg or other battlefields. It's also nice because they almost always have monuments or at least documentation. So if you do get some information that, first of all, it gives you names that you can use when you're trying to get EVP and actually try and contact an individual. And it also you can back up stuff. In other words, if you get evidence that something happened, you can always look in the records and see, well, by golly, that really did happen. So it's a little different doing the battlefields, but I think that they are actually battles create the perfect storm for ghosts, if you will, because of the typical ways men died, the horrific ways that they died in those battles. So that's why I gravitate towards battlefields.
I think it's important to talk about how to go about investigating these things intelligently, and I think even what you were just talking about, how specifically like talking to the soldiers with a level of respect and actually like within terminology that they would recognize and understand. I mean, referring to the idea of asking their highest ranking officer to step forward. I mean, I think a lot of people would almost sort of overlook an idea like that. But I mean, and obviously having such an intimate connection with the area yourself personally, I think that's in some way or another potentially going to like help the experiences come to the surface, because maybe theoretically ghosts are kind of picky and choosy as to like who they actually try to talk to, because
I think it's in terms of the understanding, like this whole ghost thing. I'll just sort of throw in one idea here, and then just want to pass this over to Dave again. But I think it's really interesting when you think about the idea that ghosts are like within the same dimensional space as us, but just on a different vibration. So in that simple sense, it's kind of like a one-way mirror, meaning they can see us, but we can't see them, sort of thing. And then the thing that I'm particularly interested in, and I actually talked about this within the video that I did, is the commonality between the experience of a person who has passed on and the experience that we have every night when we dream. Because I think where we go when we dream is very similar, if not the same, but just with a slightly rendition version of the state that we are in after we pass through this life, after we move beyond the physical body. And in that sense, it's the idea that in a lot of cases, how a lot of us don't realize that we're dreaming when we're dreaming, in the same way that we're not lucid when we're dreaming. I think it's really interesting when you think about the idea that some ghosts they don't realize that they're dead when they're dead. So they're kind of walking through a building as if you were kind of walking through the building in a dream, and you're just kind of like, things are kind of foggy, and you're just kind of doing things, and your consciousness isn't really there. It's not like totally present. But just kind of, Dave, if you just want to like expand on that a bit more, just on the point that we had mentioned in the video, the idea of the topic of the lucidity of death, and how that can even just be, how that idea can be tied in with ways you would go about approaching an investigation.
Okay. Well, like I said, I do think it's important to do that. I mean, one of the things that comes right down sometimes to the stale questions that people ask when they investigate. They tend to have the same basic 5 or 6 questions over and over again. When you're there and when you're asking Spirit to speak to you, I mean, you really kind of want to get in depth with them about that, because you, again, maybe realizing that they may be walking around you, and this is hopefully where they get the noisy ghost syndrome, or where they're pushing things, is because they have, they see what's going on. It's got to be sort of frustrating, I imagine. So we got to think about the spirit's emotion, if that exists, that they've passed on and they're trying to communicate with you, and now finally they've got somebody's ear. You want to ask the appropriate questions and understand that veil may exist. And this is why, I tend to ask a lot of questions about feelings and that, right? I mean, how does it feel to be passed on? Do you know that you're passed on? And do you see me the same way I see you? And, do you see other spirits? If there are other spirits and they're with you, are you seeing each other, or are you just passing each other like cars in the night? I have no idea that you're there. It's important to realize the consequence of what they may be going through, right? As well as, when Mark had brought up a good point there, when he was speaking about the genteel way of speaking, where you're going into an investigation, it should all be relative, right? I mean, we don't provoke, but, if you're in a prison, like we've investigated prisons, you use a different kind of language ahead of time, maybe research some of the language that they would use, not necessarily the cussing, but maybe some of the prison lingo. We have several bilingual investigators, so if we're investigating a house in Quebec, if I'm asking questions in English, that may make no sense, right? So why would they speak back to you in English? Yeah. They may not understand, so they'll speak in French. We have many a time where, if you're especially investigating where some children have passed, I'm somewhat of a louder individual, so I might ask Sandy or somebody else on the team to talk, because the female's voice may be a bit more receptive to that child. And we've got to be conscious of what it is that we're investigating specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was anything from the peanut gallery that you wanted to add?
No, I'm just listening. I'm fascinated by everything I'm hearing. Just keep going wherever you're going.
All right, perfect. Now, Mark, what I'm curious about, it was just mentioned briefly earlier in the episode, the idea when we're talking about different ways to go about an investigation. There is the idea of using a medium, what would be thought of as a psychic medium, and we've talked about psychics in the past, and I think in itself the word psychic should just be sort of thought as empathetic.
and someone who is like sensitive and be able to be in tune with the subtle energies around them. And in this case, the subtle energies around them could be those of the spirits who have passed on, and as such, they are that medium, quote unquote, for communication to occur. Now, Mark, I'm curious as to what your personal take is on the process of using mediums, and has that been something that you've personally been around or seen used within Gettysburg, and how has that turned out?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we do. Now, I have to be careful and qualify this because we have probably worked with a dozen different mediums over the years and narrowed it down to 2 or 3 that I can really trust. And the way I've determined this is, once again, matching up what they've said or what they've felt or heard with the actual historical facts that have been documented, that the people that were there actually witnessed at the time of the battle. So those are the people I trust, and the way, you have to take everything in this field with a grain of salt, including the EVP or even the photographs, because you look at the stuff and you say, boy, there's a face in that picture, and then you have to remember about the apophenia and all that other stuff, where the mind will connect the dots, and same thing with the audio, everything. But at any rate, the mediums that we use, usually I ask them, can you give me a name? What name comes up? And as a matter of fact, one of the EVPs that I gave you, the Confederate soldier, they found out he was a Confederate soldier. They said his name was Andrew. Now, I don't know where this comes from, unless it's the Akashic field or something, but I do know that they sort of have to be or tap into the alpha state, which is basically what you're doing when you're getting into the dream, the sleep mode. So, this all falls together. Everything you said and things Davis said, it all kind of falls together. Mediums, like I said, I do work with them, but only a couple, the ones that I've worked with before, and just for specific information that I can use to gain more information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, and I think that there is some legitimacy to being able to use a medium. And Dave, just going back to you, I mean, what are your? I mean, you already said that you don't really use them. What are your personal thoughts on the process of using mediums? And maybe have you ever seen that sort of almost, kind of put? I don't want you to say the term like put like a black eye on the paranormal investigation, but obviously sometimes if you bring in an idea like that, sometimes it can get pretty hokey, so to speak, or kind of woo-woo. Dave, what are your thoughts on the idea of using a psychic medium?
Okay. Well, I mean, I got to preface this by my upbringing. I grew up in the spiritualist church, right? So, kid all through teenage, whatever, all my adult life, I've been around mediums and psychics. I mean, that's the church where they came from. So, I've seen them in their process of training. I've seen them in the psychic fairs, and I think that predicates my thoughts towards them in the way that a lot of them do tend to come up with the I see a gentleman around you, or they tend to, a lot of them, a great deal of them, play to just the I don't know, I want to call it an ego entertainment factor. They tend to be rather ubiquitous with what they're saying, so that it is coverage to everybody. I mean, it's not hard to do that. I've met a few in my life that I think actually may have a gift. I think for us to sit back and think that nobody has that gift is kind of ignorant. I mean, it's the same thing as thinking, hey, there's nothing out in space. Well, there's got to be people on this planet that have that metaphysical gift that they've honed, developed, given, whatever it may be. Now, that being said, because I tend to play to a bit more logical sense during investigation, I'm not a huge fan of using mediums. I have used them. We will use them when a client has asked for it. We will use them, and generally I use them as a barometer. Even the one medium that we've had on our team, Donalda, even she knew that the approach she needed to take was that if she felt that there was something that needed to be investigated, she was to pull me aside and say, I feel something strongly in this room, but not to let it out, because that would then mar the investigation. Now everybody else has got this preconceived notion. But I think they do have their place. I think, unfortunately, there's too many mediums out there that are making a clean buck on this. We've got them around here where they're charging $1,000 for a house clearing and this and that. It's to me, it's disgusting. Anybody that charges you for an investigation, you should run. But it's one thing if you're going in there for entertainment factor. If you want to bring a medium into a house party and they can give all that out, that's fine. You know what I mean? That's what that's there for. But as far as a paranormal investigation, unless it's called for, I'm not really into that. Like Mark, I know a few of them that I trust. A few. There's far too many out there that they're just making the dollar off of it. And again, from my upbringing, for me, it's kind of easy to see through. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, and no, I think you do bring up some good points there. Even just the reiteration of the idea of using a medium as a barometer, and that's something that you even talk about with some of the tools that you use, the EMF detector. I mean, Dave, maybe you can just to elaborate. What are some other barometers that you use within your investigation as part of your tools?
Well, I would say, granted, most things are a barometer.
And I guess just explain. Or sorry, no, I was just going to say, just explain what you mean as a barometer.
Well, just I could say an EMF detector, so electromagnetic frequency detector. These things, depending on their make, measure a certain level of hertz, right? So I mean, they can pick up anything from a TV to a wire in the wall to something much higher than that. So unless you're properly trained on how to use it, sometimes it may not mean a hell of a lot. But that being said, if you've done your base reads, and your base reads show something that the place has got zero electrical anomalous, then something does happen. It's not proof, but it could be something to say, all right, well, we got something to go on here. You know what, right now our room is reading a certain level, and before it wasn't. Why? Okay, so now we run around and try to find why. Other things, geophones, where they talk, it measures the measurement, measures the physical feeling, like on a floor. You put a geophone on a floor, and the lights will go off if the floor is moving. These REM pods, which are a big deal, that's also kind of an EMF detector. If something's I've heard it's shadow detectors now. I'm not really sure how that's supposed to work personally, but most of really what we have on hand is some form of barometer in the way that now that it's showing me results, that gives me something that I can go investigate. The only, in my honest, true, two pieces of equipment that are not really barometers are your audio recorder and your video camera. And your video camera I use to spell what's on the audio recorder. So that they're just it's really just there to document everything we're doing, not really to catch a paranormal activity. I mean, 300 plus cases we've done. I think I've caught one piece of video evidence that's it. 320 investigations, and we've got one little piece of video.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are surprised by that statistic because, I mean, when you think about the idea of ghosts, the mind wants to see something physical or wants to see something visually, and obviously, videos of that do exist. I mean, in most cases, they probably could be discredited. I mentioned this in the video. Personally, I'm interested in the orb phenomenon and the idea that in itself could be representing a spirit. And if you watch the video, I explained as the orb is actually the vehicle that is used by numerous spirits. It's just a common vehicle to move through dimensions. And the term Merkaba is something that you can look into if you're more interested in that. But I do have a couple places that I want to be able to take this conversation in. And what I would love to do is to actually get into some stories and also to be able to share some of the EVPs that Mark and Dave have provided us with. Now, before I wanted to go there, I just wanted to go back a little bit because there was something that Mark mentioned when we were talking about the psychics. He mentioned the idea of the Akashic field, and I imagine that term might have went past a couple of people, but I think it is a key thing. And I'm curious, Mark, when you talk about the idea of the Akashic field, what does that mean to you, and how does that idea tie in with how you approach the spirit phenomena?
Well, the Akashic field, the theory, it goes back to practically the beginning of recorded time when people have been saying, for example, various, not necessarily religions, but theories, that everything is recorded, everything that's ever happened to human beings in a vast field somewhere. And Edgar Casey claimed that he would tap into that too when he was doing his the Sleeping Prophet, when he would do his readings and healings and suggestions as to what people could use to heal themselves. But the general theory is that we have a tendency to think of the brain as a library, a recording device itself. In other words, everything that we have experienced is recorded on our brain. Mm-hmm. The Akashic field, or a field of knowledge that's out there, changes it a little bit. The theory is that the brain is more like a radio receiver, and you can tune it. You can learn to tune it, and you can tune it to different, as you say, frequencies. And that, I think, would explain a lot why people have this knowledge of events that they never could have experienced, or when people get something like deja vu, which to me is like that. That's the Gettysburg experience. When people go to Gettysburg and all of a sudden they feel, wow, I have been here before. I've done this before. Paul may have felt that when he was, maybe that's why, Paul, you got into reenacting, because you had that strange, comfortable feeling when you were, wearing the uniform. Maybe, this is that Akashic field. So that's basically what that is, that everything is there. And it also works with things like remote viewing, where you can literally go to other places in your mind. There's so much that it would explain if you think of the brain as a radio receiver rather than a recorder.
Absolutely. I think that definitely is a very key thing to tap into. And one thing that actually came up in one of our recent Paradigm Shift community meetings that we had here in London was the idea of actually being able to tap into the memory of our ancestors through our DNA, and how that memory that is still with us can come up as deja vu. And I think what you touched upon there, Mark, is a very interesting idea. And actually, I will pass it over to Paul here just to get his words on it. But the idea that if Gettysburg involved so many people so many years ago, who's not to say that the souls that died at Gettysburg, who have been reincarnated since then, are naturally being drawn back there for, subconscious reasons, so to speak, and that, I think that's just a phenomenal idea to play with. The idea that an X number of percentage of the people who are historical reenactors today of the Civil War may theoretically have actually been in the Civil War in a past life. I just think that's an amazing idea to sort of play with. But and for myself, I'm very curious to go over to other places in other parts of the world, places in Europe, places where there have been battles there, and to see for myself, what do I feel? Because for me myself, I've sort of got the without actually knowing for sure, but the feeling that part of my past life does go back to places in Europe, and there's thousands and thousands of wars that occurred there. But so Paul, just passing it over to you. What was that? Take us. What was it actually like for you to be back at Gettysburg, and did it feel like you had literally been there before?
Mark brought up an interesting point about the sense of feeling, because it's one of those things you Gettysburg, you can't explain it. You have to experience it. And I found that when I went to Gettysburg for the first time, as I said, it's just, whether it was my imagination or something intrinsic in me, but I just lit up. And I just felt a feeling that I'd never had before in my life. And it's kind of funny because I find myself year after year having a need to go back there. And it's a corny saying, but I've said to my wife, I said, somehow with Gettysburg, I feel like I'm going home. I can't explain it. I don't understand it. But I find I have a need to go to Gettysburg, whether it's something that is emotionally or spiritually drawing me there, or it's just something that I have to touch base with. But I find that it's something that was inside me, it was woken up, and it's been there ever since.
Yeah, very, very interesting account right there. So, with that said, sort of segueing in just wrapping up all of what we've talked about here, I'd love to be able to go over some of the EVPs that we have available with us. And Mark has provided 3 of them, and Dave, we actually have the one that and the Imperial Theater. Now, in terms of the investigation and sort of allowing the audience to sort of get involved in this their own ways, I think we'll kind of play the EVPs and let them hear it without us telling them what the ghost is saying the first time, so that they can sort of hear it with that first impression. And so with that said, I mean, I'll bring you guys back on in a second. I'm actually just going to mute us, and I'm going to play the first EVP that was actually recorded at the Imperial Theater. That was the video, the location that I was at in the video documentary that we did. And okay, hold on. Sorry, Dave is just messing me. Sorry, only the one computer is being switched over. It was the only one on the computer. Okay, no, Dave's just saying that. Sorry, Dave, you can talk real quick. Are you saying that your phone battery is going to die?
No.
Okay.
I was just saying I do apologize. We have a lot of EVPs, but we're in the process of having a computer switched over, so it was the only one Sandy could pull off what we had. So it was more of a technical issue.
So there were more EVPs from that night that we were at the Imperial Theater.
And anybody, they can go on my website, and if you go under investigations on our website, there are EVPs all over the place to click on and listen to.
Okay, cool. That's definitely, and just to sort of go back, I know I didn't mention this at the top of the show, but it will be in the show notes, obviously, and quite prevalent. For those of you looking to connect with Dave, you can go to his website for the Canadian Haunting and Paranormal Society at chapsparanormal.ca, and you can find them on Facebook. Just run a search on Canadian Haunting and Paranormal Society. Also for Mark, you can find his website at marknesbitt, that's 2Ts.info, and there you'll find more information about the tours that he's involved with and also his book series, and we'll get them to be able to plug some additional projects that they might be working on and all the information they want to share with you that's coming up in the future. But just going back to this EVP, so that's interesting. So I wasn't fully aware of that this is obviously not the only EVP. So,
no.
Again, if you want to check out more of those, you can find those through the website in the future. But we'll mute everyone first. So, Mark and Dave, I'm just going to mute you guys real quick. 1 second. And then I'm going to mute myself, and then I'm going to play this audio clip, and we actually have it so it repeats. I sort of tweaked it up for your convenience, so you're going to hear it. And then the EVP, the electronic voice phenomenon, the part that we're recognizing, essentially the noise of the energy of a spirit using its voice, using its vibration, and that vibration is moving through the energy that is around us and being picked up as quote-unquote sound by the audio recording devices. So this is again from the first paranormal investigation that I went on with Dave and the guys of CHAPS. So here we go. 1 second.
Why don't you come give me a shove in my shoulders? If I die, it's okay. I have a life insurance.
Yes, they're worth it. Yes, they're worth it. Yes, they're worth it.
So that's that one. So I'm going to bring everybody back on. And I'll ask Dave, since he was the one who captured that. Dave, what is your interpretation of that EVP that we heard there?
Well, the one spot right there that you had heard, it was basically where it had stated at the very end of it, and you could hear it got shown 3 times afterwards, is where it said it's not worth it. And we had a number of video cameras on me that night and on everybody else. Sandy did an analysis of everybody's voice. I picked out a voice sample of them, put it through the oscilloscope and all that noise. And it wasn't any of us. So after I had said, it's okay if you push me over, I've got life insurance, and the term, it's not worth it. Okay? Now, what I did like about this one particularly, one was, we couldn't debunk it, and generally I don't put an EVP out unless I can't debunk it, was that it was directly correlative to what I was saying. And so it made it a decent find. Is it proof? No. Is it 100%? No. But it was certainly something that came up that was a point of interest for sure.
And like you said, the fact that it's not 100% confirmed, I actually did want to sort of step in here as part of the investigation because there was something that I just wanted to clarify. I actually found that spot within my own footage of when you were saying this, and this is something I wanted to share with you, and then I'm sharing with you right now, but the idea that I actually picked up what we heard in there and recognized as the EVP on my camera as well. So my question for you, Dave, is the fact that I picked it up on my question, does that mean that both my camera and your audio device picked up the same EVP, or does that in some way potentially mean that what I was capturing was not an EVP?
Well, yeah. Now there's that does come to a thought, because most times, if we have something that's picked up by audio on a camera, we generally will dispel it just simply because it was obviously a physical noise. That would point to question on that. Now, mind you, would I also sit back and go, that is an audio recorder of sorts on your camera. Does it completely discount it? I wouldn't say 100%, but I would certainly say that does add another element of, okay, maybe we need to sample it a bit more, or therefore. This is why I never say nothing is proof. There's no such thing as proof. I can't stand that when investors go, your house is absolutely 100% haunted. I don't mind going in and saying, you know what, there seems to be a level of activity here, yada yada yada. But I'd have to maybe have a relook at that. Maybe that's possible that you've dug something else up there to make us look at. So on one hand, I'll say thank you, and on the other hand, I'll go drat.
Yeah. All the time. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I agree. I mean, if it's an audio thing in general, then who's to say that my camera isn't just picking up the same thing, the same vibration? If it was a little pebble that was thrown into the water of energy around us, then yeah, there's no reason to think that it didn't just pick up the same thing. So yeah, definitely an idea. So we'll actually, I'll play that one more time for the audience, and then we'll go over and Mark's gonna talk to us a bit about the other EVPs that we got, and we'll just sort of make our way through those as well. So I'm just gonna mute everybody again, and I'm just gonna replay the EVP that we just played of the ghost saying it's not worth it. So listen and sort of just you don't have to decide either. Just take it as information. It's all information. Just think for yourself. That's the theme that we here at Paradigm Shift Radio like to reiterate and remind you of. So again, listen to this.
Why don't you come give me a shove in my shoulders? If I die, it's okay. I have a life insurance.
Okay, so there it was again, and I just gotta say, for the people who are listening to this in the live chat, go back and listen to this on YouTube if you find that the sound quality isn't the best. That's not necessarily, that's a Blog Talk Radio thing, I know when it plays back, so people might not have been able to hear that at the best, but so if you want to hear that again, be sure to listen to the YouTube episode version of that one. But you could definitely sort of hear it there. I mean, you hear there's an inflection, there's an inflection in the sound, which we as humans recognize as a voice, so yeah, it makes you wonder, right? So going to bring back Dave and Mark on here as well, and going to pass it over to Mark. I mean, Mark, before we introduce the EVPs that you supplied us with, just in general, was there any sort of thoughts that you had on that as an EVP on that one?
Yeah, I would. It's rare, but it does, and I've seen it happen or heard it happen, where two recorders in the same room will pick up the same EVP. So Dave, don't get it still could be EVP. The whole point of EVP is that it's electromagnetic. It's the fact that you didn't hear it is important. Right. But I have had experiences where two recorders have picked up the same thing. It's rare, but it happens. So and it's impressive, and it's more impressive, I think, on the on the video that you have there, because at least I heard it better on that video. So I would recommend people going to your website to listen to that.
Okay, cool. All right, so Mark, setting us up for some of the other EVPs here that we got. Let me just see. So I don't want to spoil them.
Right.
How can we do this without spoiling them? How can we identify
why don't
them?
Why don't you just go ahead and play
yeah.
one, and then let me explain where it is, so I know where it is.
Yeah. Okay.
So go ahead and play it.
Okay, all right. So we're going to play one, and I actually, listening to this ahead of time, I did pick out what I recognized as the identified EVP and did loop it. So again, we'll play it twice for your convenience, and I'm just going to turn the sound up a little bit on this one, so hopefully you'll be able to hear it. So here's the EVP here, and I think this one might be a little, so just stay tuned and listen. Here we go.
Men of the South, are you here with us tonight? Noise. Andrew, will you speak with me? Andrew, what state are you from? Andrew, what state are you from? Andrew, what state are you from?
Okay, so that was that there, and we'll play it again so you can hear it again, but just bring Mark and Dave back on. So, Mark, explain to us, what was that EVP?
All right, that was at the Cashtown Inn, which is about 7 miles to the west of Gettysburg. About 3/4 of the entire Confederate Army marched past the Cashtown Inn. It was used by A.P. Hill as headquarters for a while. Robert E. Lee spent some time there, and so it was filled with Confederate soldiers, so it's not unusual that in fact, that information that Andrew and that he was a Confederate was given to me by one of our mediums, so that's what I used to work with. The beginning of it, you can hear the roars, and that's obviously something that was recorded that wasn't heard, but it's not real helpful. But when I asked him what state he was from, and the way, of course, you analyze this is you break it down to syllables, and that particular, it was obviously 4 syllables, and we know it's a southern state. Now, do you think I said what I think it sounded like?
Sorry, say that last part again. You actually.
Did you want me to mention, since we've already heard it, what I heard?
I think yes. What did you hear? Tell the audience.
I heard Mississippi. I heard the 4 syllables and Mississippi. He says it very distinctly, breaks it up a little bit, so you may want to play it again. Yeah.
And Paul's shaking his head along with that. He hadn't heard that before, and he heard Mississippi in it. So again, you do. You hear. So listen for that inflection. Listen for the da, so to speak. And again, that is the EVP. That's like those slight pulse waves that whether it's a voice, it's their voice, but just slightly on another vibration, but still making its way through into our vibration. So I'm gonna play that again for you guys. So listen to the part when Mark asks him what state he's from, and then it repeats 3 times, and you hear him say Mississippi. So here we go.
Men of the South, are you here with us tonight? Noise. Andrew, will you speak with me? Andrew, what state are you from? Andrew, what state are you from? Andrew, what state are you from?
All right, so I think you probably heard it that time. It's going to bring Mark and Dave back on. And, Mark, I'm just kind of keeping an eye on the live chat, and people are just sort of like, how is a ghost talking a human being? I mean, just in general, just in your words, just explain to us a little bit more about how you perceive the EVP, just and any reflection on that one.
Obviously, this is why it's called electronic voice phenomenon, because it has to be something electromagnetic. The voice box, the way I'm speaking to you, long ago decomposed on these people. So and this is why we get EMF meters will go off in the middle of a room, if they're activated by spirit energy. I'm not sure if it's 100% electromagnetic, but it certainly is in that realm, since it does set off that type of a detector. The other thing is that that's why I think, you didn't have EVP before you had magnetic tape. And back in the 40s, I heard somewhere that maybe Edison recorded it on one of his wire recorders, or magnetic in nature, and that's why it's picked up by these electromagnetic devices. And it also gives a little bit of nature what we become once we die. Obviously, that type of energy.
Yeah. And before we get into the other EVPs, I'll say for anybody in the live chat, if you do have a question in particular, private message Paradigm Shift Radio in the live chat. You can just click on it and send a private message of your questions so that we can make sure that we get those. And I do have a couple questions, and one I'll get to a little bit later, but one that I just want to bring up now, and I'll pass this over to Dave. Somebody's asking the idea of can ghosts make physical changes to matter? Can ghosts make physical changes to matter? So, Dave, what would your answer be to somebody asking that?
Well, that's one of the things we try to investigate. I myself haven't seen personal, physical, undoubtable proof of that myself. That's why I do what I do. Do I think it's plausible? Sure. Because of the fact that a spirit is in itself theoretically energy. So therefore energy should be able to affect matter. The idea that if a spirit has gained enough strength and focus, possibly, to be able to alter something physically on this plane, I'd love to see it. I've had a few experiences during investigations that would support that. Things being thrown at me, so and such. But that being said, it's not like I watched the thing be picked up and thrown at me. So I can't say undoubtedly, but theoretically it makes sense, and I would aspire that would be something that I believe personally. Anyway.
Right. And Mark, just before we get into the other EVPs here, just to give more information for our audience, what are some of the ways that these ghosts, these spirits, can attempt to communicate with us that you're aware of?
I'm sorry, repeat that again. I missed the beginning.
Yes. What are the different ways that ghosts and spirit can attempt to communicate with us?
Well, they're the same ways that you have seen on all your B movies, appearing before you, talking to you. But from the research that I've done, like I said, I've collected all these stories, and they become a data bank. You start to mine it a little bit, and what I've discovered is only about 10% of all my stories are visual. So seeing a ghost is very rare, and yet everybody wants to know, have you ever seen a ghost? If you're honest, you say, well, no. That doesn't mean you didn't have an experience. The most common is auditory. That's close over 60% of my stories are auditory. You will hear something. One of the most common is probably footsteps, movement like that. But all the senses are involved. And to answer that one question, can our physical universe be altered by a ghost? I personally have been touched by a ghost. It was once again in the Cashtown Inn, and it was like a finger going down my shoulder blade. At first, I thought, well, maybe it's just a muscle twitch or whatever. It happened again, and then I'm addressing the people around me. I said, no one's behind me, right? And they're like, no, we're all up here. And it happened a third time. And even in Dave's video, one of his investigators was touched. So,
yes,
physically it can happen. It must take an incredible amount of energy for a spirit to manifest itself in that way. But
yeah, and I'm just keeping an eye on the live chat, and somebody was kind of asking a question, and I think you just answered it there. The idea of, can we hear a ghost? Can a ghost talk to a person without an EVP? Maybe you just want to answer that, just so, yeah.
Oh yeah, well, a lot of, and this is a little bit frightening, but a lot of reports I get are people who hear their own name whispered in their ear. That's a little spooky, but that has happened. People have gotten reports of that where people heard their own name whispered.
Yeah, and I think in themes with the topics of ghosts, I think for me personally, we definitely have to look at the idea that in this episode we're talking a lot to do with hauntings, and hauntings is the idea of energy sort of sticking around to a certain location. Now, I think that for people who have passed on in general, I don't think that we have to think that they're like stuck to one area, but in fact that they can still be with us and assisting us from the other side, and in that case they do have a chance to communicate with us. And recently here on Paradigm Shift Radio, just within the last couple of weeks, we actually dealt with the passing of a good friend within our community who is a very well-known teacher, and of course that's Phoenix, for those of you who are familiar. And I mean, that just is really interesting for me, the idea that like there are these other ways for spirits to be able to communicate with us, and one of the ways may be actually hearing some sort of auditory sensation. And obviously some people are more sensitive to this than others. Again, we're all sort of attuned, we all sort of have our receiver tuned in unique ways. So some people are more they have that the clairaudience, in the same way that you have clairsentience and clairvoyance. So clairaudience is being more sensitive to the hearing. And I know there are people who are listening to the show and people who I'm friends with who have had this growing up and who still do have this. But another way that this isn't totally related to what we're talking about, but just for people listening, another way that spirits can communicate with us is through through the act of symbolism in general. And sometimes, like that can be a very synchronistic thing where you just happen to like find like the book of your friend who had passed on, and it was like their favorite book, or you hear a certain song on the radio that was like the song of you and your friend at the right time. So I mean, in that sense, it's kind of like a more top-down synchronistic type interaction, but definitely just ask yourself as to how are you open to receiving communication from the idea of these spirits who are on the other side? Because that's, for me, something that is very, very interesting. The idea that as we as humans can continue to evolve, can we reestablish a relationship between ourselves and the spirits who are our ancestors, so to speak? And if you think you look at a lot of the cultures before us, that was actually quite a common thing for them to have that connection to their ancestors. So maybe what we're doing here with this paranormal investigation using physical electronic tools is just the way that we're moving ourselves closer to developing, to creating that creating that bridge of communication for it to be able to occur. And yeah, definitely a lot of interesting topics and ideas that can sort of branch on that point. And I'll just sort of put it out there. Dave, was there anything that you sort of wanted to add in terms of what we were just talking about and what Mark had mentioned?
No, not really.
Okay.
Your last spoke there about synchronicity. That's obviously a very personal thing. I think one of the things that the results of an investigation that we might gather, part of the individual client, it's going to mean different things to everybody. And I think sometimes we may not realize we've given them a level of evidence. We may think what they've given them is quite weak, but when they look at it, it's very, very strong for a totally different reason,
Right.
And it's because of something like that where they've got a correlation to that result. I hope we're able to bring some calm and comfort to some people that we do present evidence to, and not out there to scare people. But no, that was a really good topic.
And I think Paul has a point to make, so I'm just going to...
No, actually, I have a question for Mark, because we're talking about establishing contact. In your experience in Gettysburg, Mark, have you ever had anybody that has been a descendant of anybody that has been killed at the battle that has actually come down to the battlefield looking to reconnect with their ancestor?
Well, actually, I had a relative that was killed at Gettysburg, and it's kind of interesting. I don't recall ever having attempted to communicate with him personally. I know some people do come to Gettysburg trying to communicate with their ancestors, but I can't really recall. No one's come to me about it, or at least I just can't remember. With the number of stories that I've gotten. But I think there could be a connection there on the DNA level, or on the maybe just the spiritual level. often wonder. We talk about guardian angels, and we talk about and documented events where people have been basically saved from a car wreck or something because they heard a voice telling them, don't leave this stop sign yet, and a truck goes blowing through the other stop sign. People have been warned, and sometimes I wonder if that's not our ancestors, kind of sitting on our shoulder and saying, be careful here, you need to be around a little bit longer. So, there are a lot of stories and documentation about that type of thing, and certainly Gettysburg. I mean, the ancestors, the descendants of those soldiers are legion, and they come to Gettysburg too to look up their relatives. I know that Pennsylvania Monument has the name of every Pennsylvania soldier who fought in the battle there, so it's easy to make that contact, in terms of history. So, I would encourage people to try and do it in terms of the paranormal, to touch base with them.
Actually, if I could just ask one other question maybe before Brendon gets back into this. Do you find that there's something like an energy connect going on here where there's people, because a lot of times they talk about energy being like an energy signature that is on the battlefield, and that you get people, do you find that there's people that are kind of, they've got an excessive amount, like they're connected to this type of thing anyways, and that they're drawn to Gettysburg, and then the fact that exceptional people coming down to Gettysburg, that it tends to feed that energy? Oh yeah, I mean,
it's always different. The different people come to Gettysburg, and they have different levels of abilities, of sensitivity. But even those of us who are skeptics or who want to, do this scientifically, as Dave pointed out, he wasn't immune to it either. You get there and you get this feeling, and it's like I liken it to the fact that when you walk in a church, I mean, it's really just a building, but it's a different place. You're in a special place when you're at Gettysburg. And that a friend of mine who did one of my first videos mentioned it once. He said, "You go out in the middle of Pickett's Charge and you feel the great crush of souls," and that's a pretty good way of putting it, I thought.
No, that's good for me.
Cool. Yeah. Going back to what we were sort of talking about before, with the idea of through this paranormal investigation, we're almost creating a modern day means to reconnect with our ancestors, and I think that just to sort of mention my own ideas here real quick, like the idea for me that I'm really interested in being able to communicate with those who have passed on, with those on the other side, through mindfulness approach. Obviously, that can even be thought of as the idea of getting into a deep meditative state, and then working with meditation as a practice, and even the idea of being able to communicate with these other entities, like in our dream space. Going back to the idea that our dream space is a very common and similar place to the idea that it's all within one space, but it's just like different vibrations, so to speak. But again, just so for those of you who are interested in exploring your dreams and lucid dreaming, it's something we've talked about on the last episode, actually, of Paradigm Shift Radio. Just think of that as paranormal investigation every night. So you want to be a good student of that investigation process. So make sure that you stick with your practices to be able to investigate your dreams as much as you can, and you may be surprised because of what you write down in your dream can be thought of as very, very reminiscent to an EVP. I mean, it's definitely a piece of information that comes through. It's not everything that comes through, but when we wake up with a dream, we have an idea, and that idea could be something very specific from someone who has passed on, so to speak. So I mean, that's just something that I kind of wanted to add in there. But just going back to just the general topic of EVPs, we'll go into the next EVP that we have here, and this one, not to give it away because it doesn't give away the context of it, but this one. Yeah, because Mark, there's one that I pulled and I could barely hear it, but this one did stand out a bit more, and this one within the file name was labeled 1940, so I'm not sure if that's referring to something in particular. Obviously it is, but we'll find out in a minute. So Mark, was there anything that you wanted to say about this EVP, or should we just do it the same way and I'll play it and we'll talk about it in a second?
Well, it's obviously some mysterious code that I myself created and can't figure out at this point. But go ahead and play it and we'll go.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm just gonna mute everybody and we'll bring everybody back. Bring everybody back in 1 second. So stay tuned and again, just listen to this. The EVP part will be repeated a few times. So see if you can hear what they are saying in response to what Mark is asking.
Emma, did you find any coins? Emma, when you're talking to us, could you do it a little more quietly? I know it's difficult to do this, but you're a little bit loud. If you could talk a little more softly, we might be able to hear you better. Thank you, Emma. God bless you. You talk a little more softly, we might be able to hear you better. Thank you, Emma. God bless you. You talk a little more softly, we might be able to hear you better. Thank you, Emma. God bless you.
Okay, so maybe you heard something there, so we're going to bring back on Mark and Dave. So please explain to us, give us some context. What was that we were listening to there?
All right, we were at the Railroad Engine House for the Gettysburg and Northern Railroad. It's built in 1999, but it's on very historic ground. It's on the first day's battlefield, so it is active. And the person that I'm talking to was a woman who was associated with the railroad. The EVP I was getting up to that point was very, very, very loud. You know, you get these roars, and you know, it's to some people it's impressive, but it doesn't give you any information. So I asked her. I said, Emma, would you could you speak a little more softly? And right after I say that, you hear something, be quiet. I like to think that she says, I'll be quiet, but I can't quite pick up the aisle, but I hear be quiet in there. And it's in a modulated level so that you can actually understand that.
Yeah, and what you're just saying there, the idea that sometimes the EVPs, like too much noise can come through. Is it that's something that you don't want to just elaborate on that? That's something that you have to deal with, the idea of too much coming through?
Well, yeah, and once again, you get sometimes situations where it sounds like everybody's trying to talk to you. The white noise, like at your, like when you're at a party, you know, and you're trying to converse with somebody, and you can hear everybody in the background, you don't know what they're saying, and that's why at least we try and narrow it down to the highest ranking officer, or maybe in this case with Emma, to get her to maybe be a little more quiet. Remember, they can't hear themselves because once again they don't have the flesh and blood of the ear and the internal ear. So it's kind of like, you know, when you're singing and you have your iPod or whatever it is on, and you think you sound great, you know, and you sound terrible because you can't even tell you can't even hear yourself. So that's, I think, what happens. And when I asked her, I said, "You're too loud. Could you be, you know, a little softer?" And that's what she responded.
Yeah. And now, were you able to? I mean, when you said you're being too loud, was there a meter you were looking at?
No. What was happening is that's about the third recording that I did communicating with her. We're still working on real time. I have a couple of recorders that will record and I can hear them, but we're still working on real time. Right now we're dealing with ask a few questions and then play them back. And what was happening is it was way too loud. I couldn't understand what was going on, and so that's when I asked her to be not as loud.
That's a very interesting idea, even the idea of developing some sort of relationship with a spirit so that some form of actual conversation could occur with more than one visit. I think that's a very interesting idea. It's, so to speak. But, sorry, Paul, did you have a point?
No, actually, I was going to, listening what Mark was saying about her response, I heard, okay, I'll be quiet. That's what I picked up.
Okay.
It was okay, pause, I'll be quiet.
Yeah. All right. So
you may have younger ears than I do, Paul. I know. When we put EVP in front of like 14 and 15 year olds, they hear it right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, actually, I heard three answers. There was three answers there.
Great.
There was one answer. There was okay, I'll be quiet, and then there was something else after that.
All right. Well, I think we'll have to continue this investigation and listen to it again. So we'll listen to the part, and you'll be able to hear something and try and investigate it through your own means and decipher what it is that the spirit is trying to communicate with us. So I'm just going to mute Mark again, and I'll just bring the guys back on in a second. So, okay. All right. So again, here we go. Here's the EVP.
Emma, did you find any coins? Emma, when you're talking to us, could you do it a little more quietly? I know it's difficult to do this, but you're a little bit loud. If you could talk a little more softly, we might be able to hear you better. Thank you, Emma. God bless you. You talk a little more softly, we might be able to hear you better. Thank you, Emma. God bless you. You talk a little more softly, we might be able to hear you better. Thank you, Emma. God bless you.
Yeah, so spooky stuff right there, boys and girls. So actually, I think Paul, go ahead.
No, just a minor correction on that. You hear all right, I'll be quiet, and then after you say something, you say thank you. I'm pretty sure you hear okay.
Okay, yeah, all right.
Might be something else in there. So yeah. And what are your thoughts on that one?
My thoughts on that? I had a hard time hearing it before. Now, mind you, being on a telephone, it's not the greatest medium to hear that. But after a little bit of clarification, certainly what Paul had mentioned, it did stand out as being a tad clearer. Mind you, I've obviously got to take a skeptical approach to that, saying, is that fact because now it's pareidolia? I've now been coached as to what I could be hearing. So I can hear it, definitely. But like I said, I would only say on the safe side that I'm on a telephone and that it might not have the same bearing as I would have had my headphones in before.
Right. Yeah.
So, but I can hear it. But I can hear it now.
Yeah. And Mark, was there to add in terms of that one?
I'm sorry?
Was there anything else that you wanted to add? Was there anything else that you just wanted to add, just in terms of that?
Would you say that?
Oh, sorry, Mark. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah. Now.
Okay. All right. No. I mean, I was just passing it back to you if there's anything else you wanted to add.
Well, I think the reason why we're doing it, and I agree with Dave that what should happen is that you should come up with your own conclusions. Obviously, because of time constraints, I got to cheat a little bit here and put in what I think is being said. But as we all know, when you're listening to EVP, at least in my case, I have to listen to it scores of times before I can even hear anything. Just repeat it over before I can figure out what they're saying. So it's but we can't do that tonight. But it's definitely hard to hear. But once all of a sudden it hits you, you're like, oh my goodness, that's what they're saying. So
yeah. And again, that was Dave was explaining the idea of pareidolia. Maybe Dave, can you just give us a clarity on what pareidolia means?
Well, I think pareidolia really is subjective in the way that when your mind is coached to think something, especially when you go into an investigation and let's say you go into an investigation with the mindset of I'm going to find a ghost tonight. You are going to hear every single little tiny drop, every single door creak, every single floor creak, and that's going to mean something to you. And we have to realize that physical noises do exist. White noise, I remember sitting back in my sensei's house years ago, and when you could put the static on the TV, and you'd see that, and you'd I remember they'd record it, and you'd stop it. Oh, what do you see in that? I mean, this is all goofy things we did when we were younger, and thinking that that's how I'm going to see something. But really, what it is your mind is going to see what your mind wants to see. This is why we can make anything out of everything. You do an investigation, and the minute somebody, as Mark was talking about going over EVPs, what takes the longest, the investigation itself is nothing. The evidence review is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, Sandy, who's our primary evidence reviewer, will go over an audio file 30 times, go against the video. We will probably start off with 20 EVPs on a good investigation, and then it goes down to one, maybe, if, because we want to make sure that one is, we will analyze everything we possibly can. And unfortunately, where it comes right down to it is, if it is plausible that that's what that noise is, that's what it is. That's kind of our modus on this team, that we want to be left with something that we can all shrug our shoulders and go, I have no idea what that is. So do you know what? That's the only thing we're going to do to present, because everything else, I could listen to it and go, nah, you know what? That kind of sounds like somebody on the team burping or something, in which case, then if that's what it plausibly could be, you've got to accept that as being what it is. But pareidolia, I mean, it's just basically it's the presence of something that's material that creates something your mind wants to hear, and that's probably the biggest consequence out there as to what people believe an investigation comes up with. Most people just hear what they want to hear.
Right. No, some good points there, absolutely. And just for people to keep that in mind, if you're going into some sort of environment and you're just trying to be accurate and be honest with yourself about any experiences that you come your way, just remind yourself to have gratitude with the spirits that you're dealing with, and to just be very humble and to be open to whatever experiences come your way, opposed to being like, all right, let's go get us some ghosts, yeehaw, like that's might just sort of spoil the results, so to speak. So I'd just like to say thank you so much to Mark and Dave for being on the show with us tonight. And check out their websites, I'll remind you once again, at chapsparanormal.ca and marknesbitt.info, and get connected with them, and all of them, both of them are on Facebook as well. Now, the time has flown by, and there's actually only about 20 minutes left in the show, and what I would just like to propose, as before we officially wrap things up, and this is if Mark and Dave are okay to stick around for a little bit more, I would love to hear from both of you just one more ghost story, an account that has been shared with you, perhaps even the best one that you can share with us, that really just sort of, it can only be explained as paranormal, as outside the normal expectation, so to speak. So we'll get that from them, and what I would also like to do is just to invite somebody else to call in, somebody who is one of our in, and perhaps share a story, an experience that they have of their own that they would recognize as paranormal. Or perhaps you might even have a question, but if you do have a question, then please just PM us in the live chat, and we'll be able to keep the airways open for somebody to call in and share their experience. So with that said, I'll pass it over to Mark first. And Mark, is there a good spooky story that you can share with us, with our listeners?
Well, yeah, maybe one that has something to do with an investigation as well, because there are multiple witnesses for this one. We were at doing an investigation at George Washington's Mother's Tavern, which is the Rising Sun Tavern there. And we were bringing people down to the tavern, two at a time, mother and daughter down there. And as we were doing the investigation, all of a sudden we heard, and it sounded doggone it like something out of a B movie, it's like the wind, that kind of sound, like a ooh, that thing. And they looked at me and said, "Did you hear that?" I said, "Let's see." Yeah, I immediately threw it out. 30 seconds later, like again, and I said, "All right, the next people that are going to come down are going to hear the same thing, because there's something on the team." With the next.
Sorry, Mark. Just repeat that last bit. You were just getting a little choppy there. It's not your fault. It's just kind of blog talk. Just repeat that last part. What they heard.
Yeah. Well, we had several other groups that came down, and it didn't happen again. So I went upstairs to the person who was in charge, and I said, noises. And she said, we didn't do anything. I said, any equipment. And I said, was anyone outside? And she said, no. You really don't publicize it at all, so no one outside. Back to the Marriott, a brand new Marriott in Fredericksburg, where we're get together. And we're in a conference room, brand new, beautiful place. All of a sudden, from the back of the room, we heard that wind sound, that B-movie wind sound. Everybody at this time. And the two were like, that was the sound we heard. Listen, and we all, and nobody was there. And then 30 seconds later, we heard the laughter again. It was one of those things that happened to several, and finally, and had no explanation whatsoever. It happened just once. I wouldn't even be talking about it now, but it happened twice. It was weird.
Yeah, and first of all, I was just going to say it was still a bit choppy, but we did get the gist of that story. I think one of the key things that you mentioned there was the fact that it happened more than once, and maybe Mark, just to add on to that, I think that's one of the things that classifies a haunting, so to speak, is when there's multiple accounts. Is that right?
It's a haunting. You have to want. We don't know if it was associated with a that was there or an individual was there. I don't speculate on a lot of that stuff. All I know is what happened.
Right. Okay, and again, apologize for the audience. I know it was a little choppy there. That's really just probably the ghost trying to get in on the episode. So if any ghosts want to call in, then please be sure to call in before we wrap up the show. That'd be great.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. And hold on. Okay, Paul's got a point, and then we're going to pass it over.
We got our recorders going, right, Dave?
Yeah. We got our recorders going. That's right. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Paul. He's got a point.
No, Mark. Actually, just one thing I was curious about. If you're not aware, most people, as you and I are both aware, is that this is the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg, and a lot of people think that just the battle itself happened, but they don't realize that the entire town of Gettysburg, from July 3rd on until actually about November 22nd, became a giant field hospital, in which you had 20,000 wounded. So there was a lot of pain and suffering that was going on in that. Where I'm going with this is with the 150th, with all these people coming in, plugging into Gettysburg right now, especially building up to the 150th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address in November. What are the signs of any paranormal activity going on in the city being higher than usual?
I don't have any evidence of that right now. I'm starting a trend. It'll probably be in the next 2 years that I'll wonder, because collecting, if people always ask me, is it more active over the anniversary of the battle? And I have to say, well, I don't know for sure, because we have more people during that time period in Gettysburg to witness anything. So certainly there's going to be a higher incidence of reports coming in, more people, So the 150th, whether there's something important to that, I don't know. I think it's, with energy coming to Gettysburg, both on the Vale and perhaps the other side of the Vale as well. I don't know. But I guess I didn't answer your question. I'll find out in a couple of years. Reports are coming in.
Right, yeah. Paul, was there anything else?
Fair enough. No, I was just curious.
Okay, yeah, no.
So we'll stay tuned for the next couple of years.
That's right. We'll stay tuned, and Mark's on the case.
Have me back next year.
New book coming out, 150th book coming out in 2 years.
That's right. Buy his book. Do it. All right.
Goes to Gettysburg, 150th anniversary edition. There you go.
Okay. All right. I'm going to pass it over to Dave then. So, Dave, what's a story that you can share with us that people will remember?
Well, I mean, there's been a ton of them, really. I mean, the ones that stand out, I guess, themed here that I've got. We've got Mark online, and to me, I mean, it's a joy for me to be online with him because his books were really inspirational to me when I was visiting down there. When I was in Gettysburg, I remember one time having my students with me, and we did one of those nighttime crawls. You run into reenactors all the time. I mean, that's just all what you do. And I'd gone down the triangular field. And for anybody, that's obviously a field where there was there was a massacre that happened there. And a little side passage looking on, I'm seeing some reenactors in the forest. I said, okay. So me and a couple of my students, we went into the forest. We were talking to these people, and the lady was quite nice, and to what I maybe thought was her husband, a stoic guy standing there in a beard, and didn't say anything. Actually, it was, frankly, even on a personal level, the man was really creepy. So, you were saying, do you mind if we take some pictures, this and that? Because they were in reenacting gear. And two of my students went and stood with them and took pictures. And I always thought it was really strange because when I got it developed, he wasn't in it. The guy wasn't in the picture. So
that's wonderful.
that kind of stuck with me. I'm thinking, holy crap, here we are, you're standing right next to something. It was just kind of surreal, kind of weird. And also that same night, we were staying at the Colton Hotel on Steinwer. It's, okay place, I guess. And I was in a room, and it was a suite. It was about 4 bedrooms in one apartment. And I swear I was hearing marching, like loud thumping, whacking going on in the hallway. And then my door it was hoofed open. Woof. Slam against the wall. Everybody else in the entire place is sound asleep. So just 2 experiences I had when I was down there. I mean, realistically, I've had a ton of experiences from coffin lids falling off in front of me, which put me a bit of a scare, to, it seemed like rocks being thrown at us from the top part of a prison at Moundsville. It's just an incredible array of things that occur, being in theaters and something to the sound of a ship's anchor dropping ahead of us and being dragged across the ground. Really, a bunch of cool experiences. Too many to really list here. Just thinking that realistically speaking, what I had experienced in Gettysburg 18 years ago with that arc flash in the car, the gentleman that didn't show up in the picture, and the door being hoofed open at the hotel were really the catalyst in my life to say, okay, you know what, that's 3, and that was all on the same trip, mind you. Let's look into this further, because all 3 of those things couldn't have been nothing. And that kind of set me on my path. So Gettysburg really, in closing to this, was instrumental in my desire to seek out the unknown.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'd just be really curious, Mark, what are your of a situation like what Dave was explaining, when there actually is what appears to be like someone physical who turns out to be not so physical? Like an apparition, I guess would be the term, yeah.
I've read with them, and he doesn't. And that.
Sorry, Mark, I'm just going to have to cut you off. You're just coming in a little bit too choppy now, and I don't think that's your fault. Not too sure if there's something we can do to... hold on, I'm just going to mute you and unmute you right away, and I'm just going to mute Dave and unmute Mark. Mark, try talking now. I'm just seeing if that fixes anything.
You hear me? Is this okay?
Still free. Yeah, still free. Try telling your story, or what your response was. Yeah, sorry, Mark. It's a little too choppy right now, and I don't think that's your fault. I don't know if there's a easy solution to this. One theoretical idea would be like you calling back in, but with only 9 minutes left on the show, I'm not sure. We'll probably just give it a minute or so, and it'll probably fix itself. And within that time frame, I do just want to remind people that we are looking for someone to call in to share their story. And I'm sure there's a couple people out there, whether they're your stories, whether they might be the story of a family member. But I think Paul's got a response to this is related to the triangular field that we were just talking about a second ago. So go ahead, Paul.
Actually, since we can't right now, actually, in his second book, it's called More Ghosts of Gettysburg, and on page 82, Mark does have an episode which he calls Pirouettes in Quicksand. which he talks about working with a psychic by the name of Carol Kirkpatrick of Lancaster, and they visited the haunted houses and that in Halloween of 1991 for a live broadcast, and one of the areas that they ended up in was a triangular field. So it's an area that's extremely well known in Gettysburg for its paranormal activity. And just I wanted to mention that I got right in front of me that Mark has written about this in his books.
Okay. And, Mark, we'll just try one more time. Just try responding, if you can. Yeah, no, it's unusually choppy. This does sometimes happen with Paradigm Shift Radio, so we'll see if it's quite possible that it may fix itself. Mark, if you want to try, just literally with only 7 minutes, that would just mean like ending this call and then calling back in the same way you did. That may theoretically fix it, and we'll be able to have you on as we wrap up the episode. If you want to try that real quick, Mark, we can do that. And in the meantime, I'll actually bring on another caller. I'm going to bring Dave back on. I just had him muted for a second. So, Mark, I'm just going to mute you if you want to try doing that, and we'll see if we can get you back on in the last couple of minutes. So I'm going to bring on, actually, there's one person in the queue, and they've been in the queue for a while, and I'm not totally sure. The person, their Skype name is Samantha. So if you want to be on, then we're just going to try bringing you on. And if not, then I apologize. But other than that, I think our friend Monica actually has a story. So we only got less than 7 minutes. So let's keep these stories fairly concise, so to speak. So Samantha, we're going to bring you on. Here we go. Hello, Samantha?
Hello?
Hello? Okay, I don't think it is Samantha, but your Skype name's Samantha. Hello? Caller, can you hear us?
Scott.
Oh, is this... Okay, Noah?
Yeah, I was just been in the queue the entire time, but, I mean, I could definitely have heard some really crazy stories because I spent some time in New Orleans, which some bizarre stories going on in there. And I actually did a ghost tour of New Orleans, which was absolutely phenomenal. And we basically went around to a bunch of different places that have been supposed hauntings. And if you actually look on the internet, you can look at, there's a place, I forget what it's called, but if you look up Nicolas Cage and his house in New Orleans, he basically purchased a home in New Orleans that is historically known to be haunted. And he only lasted there about a couple of months, to the best of my knowledge.
That's pretty interesting.
And I can share the story with that if you want. It's really interesting.
Well, actually, we might have to share that. I think we're just going to try and bring on Monica here as well, but we can just have you guys on to the last minute and just making sure that we leave enough time here to wrap. 2.5 minutes. We're going to bring Monica. So, Monica, I know you're pretty good at keeping it short and sweet. So, Monica, I'm bringing you on to tell the story that you have. Hey, Monica.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, hi, Monica. Go ahead, share what you were going to share.
All right, so my story is actually, I guess it does fall on the rare side from what I've been listening to today. But a few months ago, I was studying abroad in Bali, Indonesia, and the energy there is really, really different, and the culture is really aware of, like, invisible forces and things. And one night I was sleeping in my room, and I remember waking up and visually seeing my entire room in front of me, right? And I look over, and there was a lady standing over my bed dressed in traditional Balinese clothing, and it looked like she was about to, like, spray, like, holy water over me. But the second I looked at her in the eyes, she disappeared. And so I would say that was an apparition. And I went and I talked to my family members about that, and my Balinese family members about that, and they sort of freaked out a little bit and were like, please don't tell anybody that you saw them, because we don't want anybody else to get scared and blah, blah, blah. But it felt like a really good presence, like a peaceful, calm presence of this woman who was in my room. But it was, I saw colors, you know, I saw her shape, I saw what kind of person she was. It was insane.
That is pretty cool. Cool. Well, that's a good story to add to the data bank of information that we're trying to collect. Paranormal research. And I'm just going to try and bring back Mark onto the air. So, Mark, bring you back on. Hello, Mark. Just try talking for a second.
Yeah.
Okay. It's still a bit choppy, but we'll keep you on anyways as we just sort of wrap things up here. So just one sort of final question, and to just give something for our listeners to go off on. I'll put it to Dave first. So Dave, just remind us again, why is it that you are so passionate about the field of paranormal investigation?
Well, I mean, to be frank with you, I guess I'm kind of selfish in that matter. I want to see what's possibly on the other side before I go there. You know, I gotta be honest. I'd feel more comfortable if they tell me that there's nice cushions and comfortable, nice drinking beer and whatever. But I guess what passions me more now that I've been doing it for such a long time is the ability to assist people. I've really enjoyed the fact that some of our cases have really helped families, and these families have all become our friends on Facebook and whatever, and it's really nice to see what we do makes an impact on a person's life, whether it's proving something to them or not. It's bringing them some form of comfort. And if anything, with our videos, maybe bringing a little bit of entertainment to those who are interested in what we do.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. All right, and I'll pass it over to Mark. Just the same question: why are you so passionate about what you do? And if it's choppy, then that's okay. But go ahead, Mark. Try and answer.
Well, I agree with Dave. I mean, it's just trying to figure out what's going to us on the other side. And as with me, it's a matter of basically making on heroes, the soldiers of the American Civil War. I've studied them for years. It was great to be able to actually speak with them.
Okay, yeah, no, I did hear that. Just to reiterate it for the audience, just the idea of honoring those who have passed on, in particular the military soldiers who are involved with the Battle of Gettysburg. So that's an excellent point, an excellent reason to be doing on it. And I know that's part of the idea behind paranormal investigations. That in some way, I mean, we didn't really get there tonight, but the idea of doing an investigation to be able to spirits as well. So all of what we do, all of what Dave and Mark are doing are there to help each other, to help other people, and also to be able to be of some assistance, be of some service to the spirits as well, who are trying to be able to communicate back to loved ones and back to ourselves, and just being able to help piece more puzzles of put more pieces of the puzzle back together so we can shift our paradigm and just get a better understanding of what is currently considered the paranormal. So with 50 seconds left in the show, I will just remind people, of course, go to ParadigmShiftCentral.com, and we will be doing an after-party hangout once again, and you'll find a link for that through Facebook.com/ParadigmShiftRadio. So that's where you can go into Google Hangout, and we'll continue the conversation there. Really awesome stuff comes up, and it's a cool way to just get to meet some of the other people who are tuned into the show right now. So again, stay tuned for that through the Facebook, and for Mark and Dave. So again, chapsparanormal.ca and marknesbitt.info. And with that said, I'd just like to thank you for tuning in, and of course stay tuned for future episodes. And on behalf of myself, everybody listening, and my father Paul, who is with us here tonight, we'll just say thank you for tuning in, and until next time, we will see you in the future. So for everyone here, say goodbye to the internets for me. So bye internets, bye everyone. Thank
bye
you,
internet.
Happy Halloween.
Internet.
Happy Halloween.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Paradigm Shift Radio. If you enjoyed this show and would like to support it and would like to get more engaged with your local community, then consider ordering some Paradigm Shift buttons. Go to ParadigmShiftCentral.com/buttons. And of course, if you'd like even more bonus content, join up as a PSR Plus member at ParadigmShiftCentral.com/PSR Plus. Thank you.